They say betrayal cuts deepest when it comes from those we love most. But for an empath, the wound is never just personal. It penetrates the very structure of one's being. Every glance, every whispered promise feels magnified. Every subtle shift in tone carries weight. Carl Jung once wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there's any reaction, both are transformed." But what happens when that reaction becomes toxic? When the force meant to awaken connection instead becomes a mirror of envy, resentment, or false affection? Empaths naturally absorb the emotional currents around them, and in the hands of a manipulative or wounded partner, this absorption can become a trap. The heart that feels too deeply is often mistaken for weakness, yet it is precisely this depth that allows one to sense betrayal before it is spoken. The paradox is cruel. The very gift that can perceive love in its most subtle forms also detects its absence. The empath is uniquely positioned to experience love in its purest potential, but also its darkest distortion. False love can masquerade as admiration, as protection, or devotion, while hiding envy, projection, or emotional manipulation beneath a polished surface. Betrayal is not always dramatic. Sometimes it arrives softly, through subtle invalidations, repeated gaslighting, or the slow erosion of boundaries. This is where Jungian psychology illuminates the experience. To understand the empath's suffering, we must recognize projection, shadow work, and the mirror effect, the ways in which other people unconsciously reflect their unresolved wounds onto the sensitive soul. The empath's journey begins here, at the crossroads of deep perception, and the first encounter with betrayal that transforms the self. Jung believed that projection is the most common, yet most overlooked human error. We see in others the parts of ourselves we cannot yet face. For an empath, this becomes a dangerous interface. When the partner cannot distinguish between admiration and possession, the mirror effect, where someone sees only what they want to see reflected, transforms genuine empathy into a tool for manipulation. False love is never generous. It is selective. It admires the qualities in others that it secretly longs for or secretly resents. A narcissistic partner, for instance, may praise the empath's sensitivity while feeling threatened by it, or emulate their desires until their own identity dissolves in mimicry. Envy often lurks behind the initial admiration. The empath's light is a canvas, and the shadow that surrounds it is not the empath's fault, but the reflection of the other's incomplete self. To the empath, the experience is disorienting. The warmth of connection turns cold, not through a lack of love, but through the partner's projection of their dissatisfaction, their fear, their hunger onto the empath's psyche. They are loved not for who they truly are, but for the reflection they provide of another person's hidden desires or fears. Understanding this mirror effect is essential for survival. The empath must learn to differentiate between authentic connection and projection masquerading as intimacy. Jung's insight was clear. Recognition of projection allows the soul to distinguish what is one's own truth from illusions imposed by others. Only then can empathy retain its strength, its clarity, and its capacity to illuminate genuine love, rather than feed another's envy. Elena's journey illustrates the mirror effect in vivid, painful detail. She came to therapy after years of heartbreak, unable to comprehend why love seemed always to falter around her. Her story revealed a recurring pattern. Each partner represented a different distortion of false love, yet all reflected the same shadow of envy, projection, and self-serving affection. Her first partner was enchanted by her sensitivity. He called her intuitive, compassionate, even extraordinary. Yet, as soon as her emotional depth began to challenge his comfort, admiration turned to derision. He mocked the very qualities that had drawn him in labeling intuition and emotional insight as weakness. Elena experienced betrayal not in a moment of rage, but in subtle dismissals, the quiet undermining of her confidence. Her second partner presented himself as her rescuer, the strong one who could balance her empathy. Initially, it felt like protection, a safe harbor. But soon, he grew resentful of her independence, subtly demanding she shrink, defer, reshape herself to fit his narrative of control. Elena's light, once celebrated, was now a threat to his fragile ego. Her third partner, perhaps the most insidious, mirrored every desire she expressed, reflecting her hopes and fears almost perfectly. For a while, it felt like perfect love, a deep resonance that mirrored her soul. But the reflection was hollow. The mask slipped, revealing an empty shell. His love had been nothing more than projection of her own needs, feeding on her vitality, while offering nothing authentic in return. 3 relationships, 1 pattern. Elena's heartbreak was not random. It was a manifestation of the mirror effect, the way unresolved envy and projection can distort what seems like love, leaving the empath to navigate the dangerous terrain of false intimacy. After Elena recognized the mirror patterns in her relationships, the subtle toxicity of false love became impossible to ignore. She began to see how her partners had weaponized empathy itself, turning her openness and sensitivity into conduits for manipulation. This is what Jung might describe as psychic poisoning. When another person projects their unresolved shadow, envy, and insecurities onto the empath, leaving the sensitive soul fractured and disoriented. Gaslighting is the most familiar instrument of this poisoning. A small lie repeated enough, a contradiction subtly embedded in conversation, creates doubt in the empath's mind. You're imagining things you're too sensitive, that didn't happen. Over time, reality itself begins to blur. The empath questions their own perception, their intuition, even their memory, until the emotional and psychic body begins to dissociate, fragmenting the very sense of self. Projection amplifies the damage. Elena's partners transfer their own jealousy, anger, or dissatisfaction onto her, as if she were a canvas for their internal chaos. Every accusation, every subtle critique, every manipulative plea carried the weight of another person's unacknowledged shadow. The empath absorbs it, often silently, feeling responsible for emotions they never generated. The result is psychic dissociation, a state of emotional fragmentation where the empath is partially present, partially dissolved. The pain is silent, but profound. The empath feels both hyperaware and numb, struggling to discern which feelings are truly theirs and which are inherited from the other's toxicity. This stage of the journey is perhaps the most perilous because it attacks the empath's trust in themselves. Jung's insight offers a lifeline. Recognition of projection and shadow dynamics is not just theory, it is a protective act. By identifying the poisonous patterns, the empath begins to reclaim their boundaries, separating what belongs to them from what was imposed by another's unresolved darkness. After surviving the psychic poisoning of false love, Elena began to feel a quiet shift within herself, a stirring that Jung would recognize as the early stages of individuation, the awareness that her sensitivity was not a flaw, but a unique lens on reality, marked the beginning of her awakening. This stage is not sudden or dramatic. It is gradual, subtle, yet profound. It begins with a simple but revolutionary act, reclaiming your emotional sovereignty. Elena learned to recognize boundaries not as walls, but as filters, tools to discern who could honor her gift and who would exploit it. She began differentiating between genuine appreciation and parasitic dependence, between love that celebrated her empathy and love that sought to diminish it. Each past relationship was recontextualized, understood not as failure, but as initiation. Every experience of envy or projection revealed the contrast between her depth and the shallowness of those around her. Conscious discrimination became her shield. Elena could now sense without absorbing, feel without dissolving. She realized she could hold empathy in her hands, like a precious instrument, offering it only where it would be cherished, never where it would be used. Jung's notion of withdrawal projections became tangible. She stopped carrying the unresolved shadows of others and reclaimed the fragments of herself that had been ceded to false lovers. This awakening also demanded courage, the courage to turn away from familiarity, to refuse comfort when it came wrapped in manipulation, and to honor the truth of her inner vision. In doing so, Elena discovered that her empathic strength was inseparable from her discernment. She was no longer merely sensitive. She had become sovereign, able to love without losing herself, to connect without dissolving, and to give from wholeness rather than need. Elena's journey culminated in a profound realization. Her empathy was never a liability to be fixed, but a gift to be honored. The false lovers, the envy, the projections, the psychic poisoning, all of it had tested her, refined her, and ultimately revealed her power. Jung would recognize this as the integration of the empathic self with conscious awareness, a sovereign empathy that serves from strength rather than from wound. Empathy, when fully embraced, becomes a guide, a moral compass, and a source of profound connection. It allows you to navigate life with clarity, to discern who nourishes your soul and who diminishes it. Elena understood that true strength lies in knowing the difference between connection and codependency, between giving from wholeness and sacrificing oneself to appease another's emptiness. Where once she had absorbed others' shadows unconsciously, she now stood as a guardian of her own emotional truth. This final stage is also about trust. Trust in your perceptions, in your intuition, in the subtle signals your empathy has always delivered. The awakened empath no longer questions their sensitivity, but uses it as a lens to make life decisions, to cultivate relationships that honor rather than exploit, to create a life aligned with authenticity. Elena's story mirrors the journey of every empath who has felt misunderstood, attacked, or diminished. Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." For empaths, this means embracing both the depth of feeling and the discernment to protect it. When your empathy is sovereign, it becomes your strength, a force of clarity, resilience, and authentic love that cannot be diminished by others' shadows. Your gift is sacred. Your light is yours to protect. Thank you for watching and witnessing the journey from empathic wound to sovereign strength. Remember, your sensitivity is not a weakness. It's your greatest power. Protect it, honor it, and let it guide your path. If this video resonated with you, subscribe for more deep psychological insights, Carl Jung inspired stories, and transformational guidance for empaths navigating a complex world. Your journey towards self-mastery continues here. Don't miss it.